We'll bring the Diversion Outreach, Public Outreach Committee meeting to order. And first item is minutes. Actually, let's check to make sure nobody's on the phone. Is there anybody on the phone? Okay, let's go with minutes. Motion to approve.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Actually, do we have a quorum?
I think we do.
Five is a quorum.
Okay, project talking points. Eric.
You get a better looking version of Rocky today. Smarter too. Not younger, but better looking, smarter.
Is that a motion?
Yeah. Can I get a second? Rocky's actually at a floodplain management conference in Cleveland with Nathan and some other folks from the State Water Commission, and trying to do some good things there. But so in his absence, I guess I'll try to cover a few things with help from Tammy. And Sadie is also here today. Sadie's an intern with us this summer, doing some outreach work and helping take minutes, among other things. So thanks to that. In your packet here, there's this sheet that looks like, the title of it is FM Diversion Position Statements, current as of May 10th, 2019. This was developed with some collaboration of a variety of legal team and management team and others to kind of have talking points on a variety of the key issues that are facing the project. I know Mary, as the chair of the Diversion Authority, certainly encouraged this, and our intention is to keep this updated as probably at least on a monthly basis, if not more frequent. And so wanted to just make everybody aware that this is available. I think it's been distributed to the board members, and we'll continue to keep this updated. The other thing I would just add is if there are topics that are not on here that you feel like should be, we certainly would appreciate that feedback, and we'll look to circulate and develop some talking points for any of those other key issues that do come up from time to time. So anyway, read through, let us know if you've got comments, questions.
And we talked about, we've taken all the old FAQs off the website because they were so outdated and incorrect. And we've talked about using this, because this is already being developed, using this as a something to kind of fill that need if people have frequently asked questions. What's the current answer?
With that, Tammy, I know there's, on the website, there's been some areas where we're able to get a little bit more detailed than what this is. Mm-hmm. This is really good for us from a standpoint of briefly talking about each of these different bullet points. But if somebody is going to our website looking for more detailed information, some of the frequently asked questions, did that before I realized some are outdated. Some might have even gone back as far as to dealing with Plan A. So I would encourage us to still have a way for somebody to get more detailed information on the things that we know. There's some bullet points here in this position statement that we're working on, and we don't have all the answers yet. But where we are confident in more detailed information, hopefully we can, through our site, figure out a way where they can navigate to that.
And I can show you one thing if you're interested in.
Okay.
So part of the reason why we went to this new layout is that when you look at, let's say, a random article about funding, on the bottom of it comes up similar posts and additional information. And so what we're able to do is, if people are obviously interested in reading one part of it, it'll suggest additional things for them to read. And the other thing is it's all date stamped, which is helpful too, because if some of that stuff is so old, if you're reading a post from 2012, it's probably not accurate. But, you know, obviously this, something from 2019 is probably pretty accurate, so.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything else? Mike?
Just the other comment is, perhaps we could expand on the title, because it's more than just position statements here, it's also status. It's a status report, because there's a lot of things that are in place or in process, and I think when people just read position statements, it kind of sounds like this is our stance on everything, and that's really not what the report encompasses. So just a suggestion that people don't view it as just our stance, it's also where we're at.
Good comment.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll go on to lands outreach activities, City of Christine.
Yeah, a couple of things here we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of and just chat a little bit about. Maybe 2 weeks ago now, Jason and myself and Greg Thielman and Dean Vetter with my team went down. We've had quite a bit of back and forth with the City of Christine recently, since a township meeting was held in Christine probably a month ago. And since that township meeting, we've had some back and forth with the city, and they invited us to come down to their city council meeting maybe 2 weeks ago and talk about the impacts the project has in Christine and talk about, you know, next steps. The outcome from that meeting was they had asked us to update the ring levy concept that was developed several years ago based on Plan A. And they've asked us to go ahead and update that to, incorporate or address the impacts from Plan B, which are less than they were under Plan A. And then tentatively scheduled to go back to the City of Christine in July and have an updated plan for them to look at and take input on. You know, of course, like every other community, they're worried about, you know, not boxing themselves in and providing a little bit of area for, you know, new development, other things. And so the ring levy concept that's being updated will incorporate that. We have to go through, you know, some technical analysis and technical review and all those things before that July meeting as well. But I think overall, good meeting. I think we were able to answer some of their questions. You know, they had some fair criticisms of the project and, you know, nothing that we haven't heard before, but it was still, you know, good to hear it directly from the city. And yeah, I think it was a good, productive meeting. So, Jason, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it was a good meeting, and a key takeaway was they were, well, not all of them were happy about the diversion. They were happy that we were communicating with them and that we were down there openly discussing and answering their questions. And so I thought that was good. And, you know, we're showing that we want to work with them in addressing their mitigation concerns.
I think one of the sort of themes we've heard from the lands outreach efforts that we've been doing is a lot of people are wondering how the project will operate. And so I know there's at least some sort of draft operating plan that's been prepared, and I imagine that's going through some updates as well with the Corps. But I think that from my standpoint, I think it would be helpful if we could, you know, maybe dust off some of our educational documents or produce some tailored educational documents to project operations, maybe a whiteboard video or, you know, something along those lines. So I don't know if you guys are hearing those questions as well, but that's kind of been a theme that we've been hearing, whether it was Christine, we've met with some property owners in Richland County, you know, a variety of other property owners that are calling and asking questions, and that seems to be a good theme that we should move towards.
So once the project is built and say Christine has a ring levy, and we're looking 40 years down the road, Christine's full, and they see opportunity to expand, is there anything against them expanding their ring levy to capture more development area? Or is that?
Not that I'm aware of down there, because they're not within the operating pool.
Okay.
So I think it would just be, you know, the developer would probably have to work with the city to pick up that dirt, move it, you know, a quarter mile or whatever it is to expand their ring levy then.
Okay,
Would there be needed a separate letter of map revision or anything done for something like that?
To move it,
Yeah.
I think so, because there would also have to be some adjustments, for example, like the lift station, because now you're gonna have a bigger area that's gonna have runoff from a rain event. You probably have to evaluate and maybe do some improvements on the lift station.
The point I was trying to make is they can probably do what Roger has asked, but there might be some things that are tied to that to make sure that expanding that, how that impacts others flooding and so on and so forth. And that's what
Yeah, I guess I would just say, Christine's been in existence for quite a number of years, and they've had, some growth. When we talked with them about growth potential, we were talking maybe a dozen or 24 type additional, and that kind of blew their mind. It was like, wow, that's, big growth for Christine, and frankly, it is. And so just to put that in context, the other thing I would add is, today we have a bunch of rules from FEMA and, other permitting agencies about, development potential and floodplains and blah, blah, blah. 30, 40 years from now, there's probably going to be a whole different set of rules and regs. And so as long as we don't, put ourselves in a box today, I think, which is your point, there's always going to be opportunities to engineer a new solution, I guess.
So the difference between the staging area and the Christine area is, so Oxbow, say they wanted to expand, that's totally different. Is that right? Different playing field?
Mainly with Christine, their impacts are just up through some drainage swales through town.
Sure.
Versus having the operating pool completely surrounding the community.
Okay. Clomar?
Yeah, so a Clomer submission, maybe 2 weeks ago now, the Clomer was submitted to FEMA. And so there's a whole process that I know the HMG guys and Nathan and Bob are quite in tune with, Jason maybe as well. It was submitted to FEMA. FEMA responded and acknowledged that they received it and they're doing their review. And so I think they have 90 days by statute to complete their review. Like some statutes, that's probably followed at some times and maybe not as closely in others. But FEMA is reviewing that, and I guess that's, that's a necessary step as we move forward to finalize the hydraulic model, as well as notify all of the communities in the area. There's something like 32 or 33 government entities, townships, communities, et cetera, that receive a notification, and we ask them to sign off on this community notification process. And so that isn't on us right now, but it will be something that comes up in FEMA's review step, as this community notification. Last time we went through this, if you recall, in 2017, when we had submitted the Clomer for the previous project, a handful of questions from those communities. And Greg Thielman did a real nice job as the technical expert answering those questions. We've been talking with some of these communities and townships, recently, but not about the Clomer model. And so there's some suggestion of, should we be more proactive and go out to, Reed Township and Harwood and some of these others, or should we, sort of send them the stuff and respond to questions? And so I guess, I don't know, I'd be curious to get your guys' feedback. And, it's always sort of a balance of how much, sort of proactive communication is necessary or worth it, if you will, or if it's better to just sort of wait and answer questions if they arise. And I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, it seems, when we sent the last Clomar out, especially upstream impacted areas, townships, they had a lot of questions and definitely took it more defensively and dug their heels in as to, this is, a negative document versus what it really was. And so I think from that standpoint, offering to go out and sit down with the townships is worthwhile. unfortunately, we know these townships don't all meet on a regular basis, so if you send out the letter, you may not be able to get to some of the townships and sit down and talk with them for another 2 months until, their next meeting. But I think that's something that's still to offer that when we send out those letters, that way they know that we're willing to come out and talk to them and explain what the Clomar is and what it all means.
Yeah, Jason, I think that's important. Not all the officials are used to filling out maybe this form and asking for this.
Right, and we've
Clomar,
seen,
so-
it's been interesting across the county, especially when it comes to townships, because of the changes in the North Dakota law over the last several years for township assessors. A lot of times those assessors were also handling a wide variety of other issues within the township, from building permits and floodplain management. And because of the change in law, a lot of townships have said, the assessors said, we're not going to do all the education and training. County, you can do that. So we've had to increase some staff at the county level to do that. But now you've got townships where you have some township officers and township clerks that they're in the NFIP program, and they're responsible for doing floodplain management, but they may have lost that person that was really their expert. Sure. And so when we send out a letter on a Clomar, they might not even know what a Clomar is. And so being able to and open to go out and talk to them and explain it is, I think, important for us.
And this is just on the North Dakota side, or does this include Minnesota?
Yep,
Okay.
it's the whole area.
Yeah, I missed that. Okay. Anything else, Mike?
Just a comment on the Clomar. If you recall, a few weeks ago, the media reported on the Clomar process and the additional flooding that would be in West Fargo. So as West Fargoans, we prepared for a bunch of blowback. And you two guys live in West Fargo, but we got one email, and after I explained it a little bit, they understood. I don't think a lot of West Fargoans understand the Cheyenne diversion, and there's still vulnerability just because of the way it is. The boulevards on Veterans are not there for decorative purposes, the medians, I should say. They're elevated as dikes. So there is a backdoor threat. And once you explain some of that stuff to them, at least the one we had was fine with. I'm just saying, we're talking about what type of feedback we might get, but we were prepared for a lot more, and we really didn't get any as West Fargo on that article, so, which is good. We're glad to hear that. Glad not to hear anything, I should say.
Right.
All right, next item is Winnipeg area flood tour.
Sure. Was 2 weeks ago now. We took a group of technical staff and some other folks up to Winnipeg to see the Red River floodway in operation. So we lost a tire on the way, so that was really fun. But we got up there, we had really excellent hosts from the Red River Basin Commission. Steve was just really great, and he helped us make a few more connections up there too. It's really interesting. I thought it was interesting to see the floodway in operation and see their control room and see how they access some of the gates and things like that. We talked with one of the engineers for the province, and he talked about the expansion project. And then Steve was mayor of one of the towns that needed mitigation during the expansion, so that was interesting to talk with him about that. And then on the way back, we met with the city foreman in Morris, and he talked about their dikes and how that works with their roads and infrastructure and stuff. And so I thought it was a really valuable trip. I think we made some good connections. I think that, if we want to do something like that in the future, I think it would probably be good for people working on this project to see how big that project is and how much, it's just hard to visualize that much water, I think. And so seeing that much water going, through a floodway like that it's a good deal. So we're making a video of that trip that just talks a little bit about how the project works so that people can kind of see it. We're going to send it up there so they can review it first. And then hopefully we'll have that on the YouTube channel this summer for people to look at. So Jason came and it was an excellent.
Yeah, I thought it was a great tour, and like she said, really good hosts and tour guides as we went through. It was really interesting to see, just how close their diversion is going to be to ours. Theirs is around 29 miles. Ours is going to be 30 miles. The width and depth of the channel, very similar. The length of their bridges. So you can, as you're driving that whole length, you can really visualize what it's going to look like for us. And then the other thing was, south of Winnipeg and south of their embankment, seeing all of the communities, all of the homes they talked about. A lot of these homes have basements on top of basements because they raised them, and so some of them might have a 14-foot high ceiling in their basement, or actually 2 basements, and that they've just grown accustomed to living within that area. And we did have 2 members of the Buffalo Watershed District there as well. So overall, I thought it was a great trip, and to be able to see it in operation, and going to see the inner workings of their control structure and the gated structure on where the diversion and it's basically their inlet control structure where the river and the diversion split. Their control gates are a little bit different than ours, but basically a similar concept. And talking with their dam operator, it was pretty easy, simple operation, and it's maintenance. It kind of talk through all of those different issues, but it's not. They sit and look at it, and it's kind of like, this is just a no-brainer. I mean, the amount of money they have saved. When you look at Winnipeg, outside of World War I and World War II, the Canadian Army's largest deployments were like the 1951 flood in Winnipeg and the 1997 flood in Winnipeg. So, it's, for them, I mean, it really is a no-brainer. And that's when we bring it to our level and go, look, to be able to save over 20, 50, 100 years on those flood impacts is a no-brainer for us.
Evan?
Jason, does the Assiniboine River meet the Red River south of Winnipeg?
No, it's right in downtown Winnipeg.
Okay, so was there any engineering aspects regarding those 2 rivers that were incorporated into that project?
Yeah, so they talked about, they've got a map, and Eric's probably digging it out right now, of kind of their overall comprehensive flood control projects. So the Assiniboine River also has a diversion that takes water north into Lake Manitoba, and then that water then flows into Lake Winnipeg. And they talked about how the interplay between the different river systems, but in 2011, because of the same time that Minot flooded, they had so much water coming in
The Assiniboine had
on the Assiniboine that at that point they did have some capacity on the Red River and in the Red River diversion, so they blew out the south bank of the Assiniboine River to allow that water to flow south, get into the Red, and then go east around town. So it was pretty interesting, some of the on-the-fly decisions that they had to make, but they were able to make those decisions because they had their diversion project.
So are there more structures in their area where they hold water in their staging area? Do they leave structures there and protect them by raising and dikes and versus what we're going to do?
Yeah, I guess I can answer that. I guess there were 3 takeaways that I thought were most interesting about this. And one of them was the upstream area where the structures are. There's quite a bit more structures immediately upstream of their project than we have here for our project, including some towns that are close to the impact areas. And as part of the project mitigation, many of these homes have been elevated, and of course there's community ring levies and those things, and some farmstead ring levies, but dozens, if not multiple dozens of homes that have been perched up on little mounds. And the one guy from Winnipeg was explaining to us that part of their approach was if those homes had an existing basement before the project, they just added a second basement on top of it and lifted the whole house up. And so they had like a 20-foot tall basement and, racquetball courts or something in their basements. But so it was really kind of, interesting to see all these sort of prairie dog type homes out there. And people have adapted and learned to adjust to that. Their driveways have a little bit of a slope to them and things. So there's quite a few of those. The second takeaway that I found interesting was the province, which would be our state government, really plays a much more significant role in operations and mitigation. Anytime there's a project impact, the state or the province steps in and provides compensation, mitigation to the impacted property owners every time they operate. And the state was very much involved in helping do some of these, structure elevations and raising and the like. And so, it's different than how we operate down here. We're sort of taking that on locally, I guess, primarily, with state support, of course. And then the third thing I thought was interesting was this map that, Kevin asked about. When we think about the Winnipeg flood protection system, our mind goes right towards the 29 or 30 mile diversion channel and the gate structure, and that's kind of their protection. But if you look at this map, you'll see that there's all sorts of other components to their comprehensive flood protection system. The Assiniboine diversion, that's probably 50 or 60 miles further west, that goes to Lake Manitoba. At the north end of Lake Manitoba this year, they're building an outlet to go further north up to Hudson Bay. There's, tieback levees and other embankments. There's just a whole, variety of different features involved in their comprehensive flood protection system. And when, I guess Tammy and others and I were chatting a little bit about that, we also have those things here. The Maple River Dam, the Upper Maple River Dam, the Cheyenne diversion, et cetera, flood walls, levees, pump stations. All of those things are part of the overall comprehensive solution. And, we're spending a lot of focus and energy on building the diversion channel, but there may be some value of us sort of putting all those things on a map. The water resource districts have been pretty involved in the, West Fargo and Cheyenne diversion. And I could see where, this map really kind of struck me as an interesting approach. And I think, we probably have some lessons learned there. So.
And then farmsteads, how did they protect those with ring levees, or what did they do there?
Yeah, some of them were ring levied, some of them were elevated. I don't know that we saw too many actual farmsteads. Maybe we saw some, of course, but.
There was some farmsteads and some areas where there was just, a handful of grain bins that were elevated. You'd see a farmstead with a combination of a machine shed and grain bins, and then a house, and then other areas it was just, a house with a machine shed, and then off in the distance you could see some elevated grain bins.
Okay.
Do they have a history with the farms? That's one of the concerns around here is the farmers are going to lose productivity and or time or whatever. They've had this in operation sometime. Is there a history to draw off there that really the farmers have been able to continue operations without being, I don't know over how many years it's been going, but how many times have they ever run into a time when it affected their operations, ability to get in on time and stuff like that?
I think there's room for more follow-up on those specific questions, but we also learned that, it's a different country. They don't have federal crop insurance the way we do. They don't they don't have the same commodity markets that we do. There's just enough differences there that I think it changes the way they do operate. And then in particular, when they do have impacts, the state steps in and provides that direct mitigation or payment to the producers if they are impacted. And so I think what we would find, and I've just kind of started scratching the surface of this in my visits up there, I think what we would find is while the project features are physically very similar, there's enough governance differences and enough operating differences that it really is going to be challenging for us to draw too many more sort of parallels.
Yeah, I don't think we can have the same programs, I understand. I'm just saying, have they been really impacted once every 10 years or once every 15 years, it's kind of the same water in different locations.
Sure.
One of the key differences there too, once you get into the Red River, north of the US border, it's all in one province.
Yeah.
So it's no longer bordered. For example, you don't have two provinces there that are, in the north, whereas you have North Dakota, Minnesota. So there's just, again, there's a lot of governing things that are different there, but there's still a lot the same too.
The other question is, Jason, do they, we're sending a fair amount of water through the cities. Does Winnipeg do that? Do they have a lot of diking and stuff like that? Do they proportionally do that as well? Because I think we're sending quite a bit through our towns.
Yeah, they talked about that, because the whole reason for the expansion after 97 was that they nearly lost the city, even with their diversion, because of all that water. And so since 97, they've also gone through and done some improvements in town. They acknowledge that they still have a shortfall in town on flood protection and lift station capabilities. So that's an ongoing process that they're going to continue to have. But they've got their flood operation plan that shows, as the water elevations go up on the river, and they're having to let more through town at certain points. They have to do all these different closures as well and have to build up emergency measures, and then they know at a certain point they would have to give up the fight as well. So they've got those elevations and or flows to evaluate that. But so they're not, it's kind of similar with our operation where a certain amount still has to go through town, and they know that based on a certain size flood event at that, when it gets to a really high level, they're going to have to flood the city as well.
Jason, did their diversion project, was that similar to ours in terms of confining the impacts to an area? For example, how about north or downstream of Winnipeg? Did their diversion have impacts downstream as well, or?
They didn't really get into that. I think the assumption is that they probably did have downstream impacts, but because from the outlet to all the way up to Lake Winnipeg, there's the channel gets a lot more defined. The soils get a lot more gravel and rock, and actually it has some steeper banks to it and some a little bit higher bluffs, and so there isn't a city or farmsteads along that segment from there to Lake Winnipeg. So it's not as big.
Not as much going on north.
Right. So if it did add a foot or two of impact, they didn't talk about that in specifics, but if it did, it really wouldn't have, 2 feet of impact downstream inside a more confined channel wouldn't have really had.
Did they have a defined dam south of Winnipeg?
There is a dam on the south side of, or I'm sorry, on the north side of Winnipeg on the Red River, there is a dam immediately upstream of where the outlet is, and that dam's been there, I think, since.
Yeah, I noticed the one dam there, okay.
Right. Yeah, I think that's been there since well before the diversion went in.
Right, well, sounds like a lot of good information.
Yeah, good trip.
Okay, item 5 is the Buffalo Red Watershed Permit Meeting.
I know some of us attended that. So their permit meeting was held, I'm going to forget the date, but back in late April. April 24th or 3rd, maybe it was?
Sounds right.
Yeah. 23rd in Dilworth. Good meeting. I think some of you were probably there. You've heard about it so far. You know, that was the meeting where the Buffalo Red Group basically asked both sides of the issue to present information, give their case. You know, the Diversion Authority team chose to focus on, you know, talking about the project and how the project is formulated and how we're going to mitigate the impacts from the project and how we're going to address their permit conditions. And so I don't know, I felt like we were maybe boring but factual and tried to, you know, share our information and our plan. Since that time, the Buffalo Red has had, I believe, 2 regularly scheduled meetings. One just I think it was just one regularly scheduled meeting. One was on the 13th of May, last Monday. And at that meeting, they acknowledged that they would likely need a little bit more time to decide on their permit decision. And so in front of the diversion board tomorrow, there'll be some discussion about a time extension request from the Buffalo Red Board, which I guess from my standpoint, sitting through all of their meetings over the last several months, I think this is not surprising. We've had some good back and forth. I think we would all wish that we were already behind, you know, ahead of all these issues and, you know, these things were behind us, but nonetheless, we continue to have coordination and interaction with the Buffalo Red Group and their technical staff and their board, and, you know, have been attending their regularly scheduled meetings for several months here. And so I think that's going well, and again, the diversion board will consider this time extension request tomorrow. Just for awareness and discussion's sake here, they had identified 3 items that they really wanted to shore up before they could make a permit decision. One of them is related to permit conditions and property mitigation in the upstream area. Their basic suggestion is that development restrictions in the impacted area of the project should be no more restrictive than current development restrictions in other locations where there's floodplain, you know, like in the city of Moorhead, for example. And so it kind of makes some sense from that standpoint. I mean, if we're going to have a new floodplain down here that the Clomer will define, why would we have any more restrictive development prohibitions or restrictions there than we would in the city of Moorhead? And so that's one of the things that we need to sort through with the different permitting agencies, the DNR, the Corps of Engineers, Buffalo Red, perhaps the State Water Commission on the North Dakota side as well. The second item that the Buffalo Red Group was wanting to, you know, sort of ferret out a bit further is the actual conditions on a permit that they might issue. We've seen their draft conditions. We've responded to those with a few suggested edits, and they really haven't reviewed all those edits yet, and so there's probably another coordination session where we would explain, you know, our reaction to their draft permit conditions, and they can decide whether that's appropriate or not. And then the third one is they wanted to have some discussion with their legal counsel, kind of an executive session with their legal counsel about permit issues and perhaps contested case issues. And so they're hoping to have all of those 3 things shored up by June 24th, which is their second regularly scheduled meeting in June, and that's why they asked for a time extension until that June 24th meeting. So again, our diversion board will be taking up that request tomorrow, and we'll continue working with them.
So I have a question on the permit decision and the contested case. Do they kind of go hand in hand?
Well, they're technically 2 separate issues. And I think most of the Buffalo Red Board recognizes that they're 2 separate issues. The contesting of the permit is really the Buffalo Red contesting the DNR's permit decision. And that's kind of just sort of held in abeyance right now, as I understand it, and that may go forward through an administrative law judge process. The second item is our request for a permit from the Buffalo Red Group. And again, they're considering issuing that permit, you know, with conditions, of course. And so those are really kind of 2 separate issues, but they're probably not completely mutually exclusive in practice. And so, which one goes first, it's sort of a chicken or the egg thing. I think at any point in time, the Buffalo Red Group could withdraw their request for a contested case hearing. And so it's probably likely that they would make a decision on their own permit before they would make a decision on the contested case request. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't know, Kevin, you're nodding your head, I guess, but I would agree.
Any other questions? Upcoming core visits.
So Colonel Calkins is retiring, and his replacement is coming in. I think the visit is what, the third week of June, second week of June? We're not totally sure yet. I know that there was a few dates being discussed. So one thing that we are doing is we're working on a gift for the colonel. It's a photo book of all of the times that he's been up here and some of the tours on the projects and things like that. So we hope to have that ready by the early part of the month so that maybe everybody could sign it by the time they come to visit. But kind of your standard, probably a special board meeting, I think, because I don't think it's a week of board meetings. So it should be good to meet a new colonel and get him up to date on what we're doing. So
I think right now the intention is to come up for that, for our board meeting that fourth week. So it's the
7th or something like that.
the 27th of June.
And what, Colonel Jansen, is that right?
Correct, yep.
Jansen, okay.
All right, is that it for visits? Okay. fmdiversion.com and traffic analysis.
So you should have the analytics report in front of you. If you look at kind of March and April, because that was the end of the legislative session, we sent out a lot of newsletters. Our typical release schedule is one a month. So you can see we sent out 4 a month for the last 2 months. And that was to kind of get some of those messages out to some of our folks that were in Bismarck or talking with folks that were in Bismarck. One thing to note on this newsletter is that this is one of the best tools that we have as a project, I think, because if you look at the open rate on the injunction, is fairly high, and we sent that to 1,400 people, and so if half of them are opening it and reading that, it means that there's interest in reading that material. On the website statistics, pretty standard month. Anytime we have big news like a change on the injunction or something like that, we see a spike in traffic. But if you look at the very bottom, the bottom part compares the last 3 months to the 3 months before that. And so you'll see that we have 50% more users in the last 3 months. And we had a lot more news, and maybe some of that was Bismarck traffic, but just a really good tool for us as well. And the other thing is that you'll notice that the number of sessions went down per user. So that, to me, that indicates maybe we have a lot more new users, and the number of pages consumed went up, which means that maybe people found other pages that they would have not gotten to with the old website layout. YouTube time is pretty much standard, about the same number of minutes consumed. And then the last page, I just wanted to show you, if you look on the right side of the screen, you'll see these Twitter posts that we made that are just facts that we have about the project. So we ran a short campaign to kind of promote these posts to get them in front of more people. And it worked, I think. We've got a lot more profile visits. And the more people that we can get as followers, we added 6 new followers. Every month we add new followers, the more reach we have. And so, all of these are ongoing tools that we continue to build, but I think they all serve their own purpose, so.
My daughter came home with a virus from school last week, and that was a bad thing, but I understand being viral in the web world is a good thing.
Right. Counts as a dad joke.
Any questions about what's going on online?
And then I have a new 3 questions video to show you.
while we are physically located in Fargo, we have a responsibility globally and nationally. We process payroll for North America here. So just US alone, we process payroll for 72,000 employees for Microsoft. And so when you think about the business operations that need to run, you can't stop operations here at Fargo. We have global operations that we're supporting and developing software for. And so this business isn't something that can just stop because it's not something that runs 8 to 5. Being a community where you have large businesses and small businesses, that when we look at the diversion efforts that need to take place, we have a responsibility to put this in place to protect both the small businesses and the large businesses. Because for a large business, we can say, yes, let's all go out, let's protect the homes, let's help support the community, and we have some elasticity to help divert work into different areas. But a small business doesn't have that amount of employees to say, okay, we're going to go have somebody else do this work while all of our employees are out protecting their homes. Every spring, this is a question that comes up. Are we going to be dealing with the flood this spring? And it's one of those things that starts to cause questions and efforts into the business, and then it also starts to cause an impact to some of our workforce issues. So we are working to recruit and retain talent on a continuous basis. And so you're recruiting and bringing in talent from different markets, and some of the things that gets looked at is things in regards to weather, things in regards to spring flooding, where do they want to live. And if every spring we're dealing with flood efforts on a continuous basis, it's one of those things that if we could just mitigate it, it would be one less thing to worry about.
Can you go to the beginning of that again? And I'm going to ask you to pause at a certain place.
Okay.
Right there, pause.
Is there a spelling error?
Do floods in Fargo have a larger impact? I think we need, this is part of where the message needs to be, this is more about Fargo, more than just about Fargo, and I guess, and that so many times, you know, I understand it's a shortened way to say things, but the fact of the matter is there is more to this than Fargo. And when you see just this, to me, it gives credence to some of the people who say, well, this is just about Fargo. And it's far more than just about Fargo. It's about Moorhead, it's about Cass County, it's about Clay County. She gave a great message, but, you know, and so the number of people that they have working at Microsoft, I know some of them are coming from Moorhead, some are coming from Hawley, some are coming from Barnesville to go work at Microsoft. So I just think that we really need to focus. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an anti-Fargo person, but this is more than about Fargo, and I think we really need to always be mindful of that when we do these messages.
That's a good point. And we can, because we produce all of it in-house, we can change that and re-upload it. That's probably a 15-minute job. So, yeah, that's a very good point.
And again, I know it's just a caption, but it's the very first thing I saw, and it instantly struck me.
Good reminder.
I understand what you're saying, Kevin, but what is the goal of these 3 question performances? What's the single goal that they're being developed for? And I think the number 1 major goal is to attract another $120 million from the North Dakota legislature. Would that be true?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there is one singular goal. I think if it was a singular goal, it would probably be more awareness for the project and the need for the project. And certainly that helps us in Bismarck, it helps us in St. Paul, it helps us, in the region here, explain the needs and, and the purpose for, why we're pushing so hard to get this project built. And so I think there's probably a way we can tweak the language to still demonstrate what you're talking about, Vern, that, some support out there.
Vern, if I can give you an example, Clay County is also involved with the Greater Fargo-Moorhead Economic Development Association. And oftentimes when we meet and have our meetings, sometimes the discussion centers on Fargo, when in fact it's about more than that. And if you start talking about, in the case of the Greater Fargo-Moorhead Economic Development, it's what's good for one community is going to be good for the other communities, and that's what we're trying to get across here. The same thing in this regards. And sometimes those of us on the Minnesota side of the river, when we attend those meetings, we once again can get frustrated over that message that it's, if you focus too much on just one. And that's what we got to be careful of, I guess. It's fine.
And I will say, for the goals, we actually have a large communications plan document, and it outlines, here's some of the goals that we need to achieve in terms of helping people understand what the project is, helping how people understand how it's being paid for, why it's worth it, that kind of thing. And so if you want to see that, I can make you a copy, because that kind of, some of these materials that we make hit multiple pieces of those goals, because it depends on what the people say. So,
If you replace Fargo with community,
yeah, that's a good idea.
it would encompass a large area.
Yep.
Good comment.
Thank you.
3 questions? Oh, I guess we just had that.
Yep.
Hello. How about 4 questions, Biddy? So, social media campaign, do you want to expand on that?
I just kind of covered it a little bit with the analytics that we did run, a little bit of an ad campaign with it, and it seemed to work. And so I think that's another good tool for us to think of using during times when there's not a lot of big news happening, so that information about the project is still getting out there a little bit. So I think we spent a grand total of $50 on it, and I think it was worth it, so.
And other business?
Just a quick question, is construction on any of the projects resumed based on the judge's authorization? And if so, I think we should be getting that out there, marketing, promoting that, because a lot of people think it's just kind of dead right now.
Yeah, right now, the projects that we're planning on moving forward with just haven't started. So, Ames Construction with the core contract at the inlet, they're planning on getting started this summer. But I think they're, the month of May here, they're kind of readjusting their work schedule with other projects in the region to get their employees back up here and restarted. So sometime early to mid-June, that should be going again.
Any of them, besides the inlet there, but any of them, we can get out on the media that, hey, we're back working at getting her done, so.
And we do expect that bypass road to the west of the inlet that will get paved here in the next week or two. And then most of the other work is in-town type work. So there's really the inlet control structure is going to be the big piece.
They'll promote it. It's
Right,
something
and
getting
then
done.
the other one is, the Wild Rice River control structure. We will be working over the next month to get that out, the bid documents out, with a goal of having that bid out and awarded by early to mid next fall, to start that construction next spring.
And we're working on a one-page document like that explains, here's all the different projects, but you haven't seen it yet because it's still kind of just in my brain, and I talked to Matt the other day about it a little bit. So hopefully next month we'll have something to kind of show you, because that is important.
So Jason, you said a couple weeks, or when the weather's fit, you're gonna
For that
paved,
bypass?
Bypass paved.
Yeah, they were actually looking to go this week. But they can get it done in about 3 days, but they need 3 days without rain.
Sure.
They don't want to put 2 inches of asphalt down and then have it rain and then trucks speed it up for 5 days and then put the top 2 inches on, so.
Perfect.
Hopefully, it could be next week, if not, for sure, the first week in June.
Okay.
Roger, I give a little update too on our MCC JPA. And for those who might be watching, what that stands for is Morehead Clay County Joint Powers Agreement. And that's an agreement that our two entities are looking at establishing for the purpose of land acquisitions in Minnesota. We did meet last Friday. Chair Sherling was in attendance via phone and was listening in, and we went through the most recent draft, and a couple of logistics we've dealt with in terms of who will be the fiscal host and where these meetings will be held and those types of things. And I know we're trying to get us similar to the Cass County Joint Water Resource District and what they do, but on the Minnesota side. So there was a good presentation there. A few things that we wanted to clean up from that draft, and the timing of that is, I think Mr. Shockley is going to present that draft document to the Clay County Board and the Morehead City Council in early June, and allow them time to review and make any other proposed changes to that, with the idea in mind that we would be voting on that, creating that entity by the end of June, with the idea of potentially holding our first meeting in July. Because I know Eric, and maybe you can talk about this too, but there has been a movement from some property owners in Minnesota requesting information on acquisition. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, but so I think we need to be ready as soon as we can on that process. Just an update on that.
Yeah, just real briefly on the Minnesota lands side, there's probably, 6, 8, maybe 10 different property owners in Minnesota that have reached out and asked to get started sooner than later. And so in the time being, then the Cass County Water District is proceeding with those appraisals and getting the ball rolling. And that seems to work okay, but it's on a purely voluntary basis at this point. Ultimately, we expect that the Minnesota group will take that role over and do all the processing. The other thing from a Minnesota land standpoint, and not just Minnesota, but we did receive a request from the Corps of Engineers to get rights of entry for a significant portion of the upstream embankment, as well as some of the upstream mitigation area for the Corps to conduct design and environmental surveys. So soil borings, cultural investigations to see if there's any historic homes, hazardous materials, kind of a variety of testing that they're obligated to do. And so that request for rights of entry will be moving forward on the North Dakota side, and we're probably going to have a second priority for those rates of entries in Minnesota and hold that until the Minnesota entity is established. And then the Corps also requested that we get easements for these biotic and geomorphic monitoring locations. There's something like 40 different sites scattered up and down the rivers in the region, all the way from north of Georgetown to, south of Christine and on the Red, and then up and down the Wild Rice and the Rush Rivers and kind of all over the place. We've done some rounds of monitoring on those in North Dakota, and we have not yet started in Minnesota, and so that's another effort that is working its way through the process on the North Dakota side, and we'll get that perfected before we ask Minnesota to work on their process.
When you get ready to do those things and what the Corps wants to do, with those sites, can we get an idea of what kind of a footprint, for example, that would be, and where do they go? Does it have to, is it close to a riverbank? Is it an agricultural field where sometimes you can get more, pushback, that type of stuff, if we can follow?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a lot more detail as that process unfolds. In summary, all of this environmental, biotic, and geomorphic monitoring is along riverways. And for the biotic monitoring, they measure, snails and other things that might be in the mud or in the river. And they want to establish kind of a baseline environmental condition today, and then as the project is built and operated over years, they'll monitor to see if those environmental conditions change. And then on the geomorphic side, it's really kind of measuring erosion. And so again, does, establish a baseline today, and then over time, does the project change or cause any additional erosion or sedimentation? And so they're monitoring along the riverways. And so the easements provide the Corps and their contractors the ability to go back to the same spot numerous times, 3-5 year type increments, measure the same conditions in the same spot time and time.
Just one suggestion, when we get into construction, and I'm sure you've already contemplated this, but flyover, drone video, 3 to 5 minutes, just to give an update for the public. I think it would be opened a lot of times, so.
Those are some of our best consumed videos that we've ever done for the project, so I would agree.
All right. Anything else? If not, we'll look to adjourn. Motion to adjourn, second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.